Okay, good morning, everybody. It's a beautiful day here in Hendersonville, North Carolina at the Namaste Center. And today, I chose the topic of love heals. By the way, did anyone in here listen to the radio show yesterday? Okay, good, because that was what I talked about on the radio, too. You can leave now. And, yeah. Well, actually, it's going to be a little different today, but this is coming quite handy because I do have to write a talk for my radio show each week, so I do sometimes go ahead and use it again on Sunday. So it makes it a little less writing than I have to do normally. And today my topic is love heals. And the reason I chose that, I love the topic of love anyway. And the love heals is actually based on, that was our tagline at the Palm Beach Center for Living, the center that we had in Florida. And I want to tell you a little bit about that center because it was such an amazing story of creation and manifesting that Wayne Dyer, believe it or not, is part of that story. And what happened was back in 1993, I look back on that time of my life because if I was to consider when I probably felt like I was in the zone or the flow the most in my life, that would have to be a time that was very memorable. And where I really felt tuned in to spirit more than maybe I ever have. And what happened was I was teaching golf full time. I was 5 months in Florida, 5.5 months in Florida, 5.5 in New York. So I would go back and forth every year and do that little golf teaching down in Florida and New York. Well, what happened at the time also, I was very much into the Course in Miracles, as I still am. But I was reading it just vigorously every day. I was just going through and doing the lessons very consciously and making sure that I was taking time to read support books to the Course and really practicing what the Course said to do, which is really tuning in to God as often as I could, as I would let myself. So I was consciously choosing. Every time before I had a golf lesson, I would say, okay, Holy Spirit, this is your time. Show me how I can be of service to this student, this person here. And you know, it was interesting because I don't claim to be the best golf teacher on the planet, maybe third, but anyway, but I knew I was very good at teaching. But besides that, I really wanted to make that connection with the people that I was teaching. So I would always just try to connect with that person on a soul level and see what this was really about. And the students would always say, man, it's like, besides playing better golf, I feel like I get therapy when I come to you. And it wasn't that I was sitting there picking their brain and dissecting their thoughts, but it was really just that connection of the heart, which the Course in Miracles really asks us to take that energy of our heart into everything we do and to come from that premise. Because it's really not about the golf lesson. It's not really about any of those things. It's really about the energy that comes with it. And that's what we're here to do, is to be led and guided by that. And then we're really making that space for healing and miracles. Well, what happened, honestly, this was the weirdest thing. Now, this was 1993. At that time, and Ellen will vouch, I was a shadow of this self, and so I'm not making it up. And I was I used to ride my bike 50 miles a day after work. And so I'd come home from work and I'd just get on that bike and I'd ride it up to the end of Jupiter Island and back. If you know Palm Beach County, Florida, that's what I would do. And I was very tuned in physically, spiritually. My life was really wonderful. And one day I had a day off. It was a Sunday, and I was meeting a friend, a fella I used to teach with, and we were going to go for a bike ride. We did that often on Sundays on our day off. And so as I'm waiting for him to come, I am sitting on my couch, and all of a sudden I had an anxiety attack. Never had one in my life, couldn't even tell you what it was all about, but I just like, and I couldn't catch my breath, and I was freaked. I was like, oh God, what's this? And for no reason. And so being a good course student, I said, okay, Holy Spirit, I can choose peace instead of this. What the heck is going on here? I surrender. What's this about? And I heard a voice, and it said, your golf is over. And I was like, what? And I mean, just out of the blue. At the time, I loved what I was doing. I was successful at it. I had no reason to leave it. Members liked me, my bosses liked me. I mean, it was all good. But I walked in, this was back in January of 1993, and I walked into my boss and I said, Bobby, I'll finish out my season here till May 15th, but then I won't be back next year. And he looked at me, he said, well, what are you going to do? I said, I don't know. And he said, well, what do you mean you don't know? I said, I don't know. He said, well, you know, if you've made this decision a little too quick, if you don't have to, if you change your mind, you're welcome to stay, basically was it. But at that point, it was kind of like it was done. And I don't know why or anything. Well, now I know why, but I didn't know why then. So May 15th, I told the boss in New York, I'm not coming back. And so May 15th, I went straight to a retreat, a yoga weekend, and just started meditating. You know, how may I serve? Where do you want me to go? What do you want me to do? And just sort of following the guidance of Spirit. Well, people were presenting things and things were showing up, but nothing really felt too interesting to me. Until I went to New York and walked into the Manhattan Center for Living, which was Marianne Williamson's center. She had a center in Los Angeles and one in New York. So I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I mean, just do it. And I walked into the office of the director and I said, I want one of these in Florida. What do I have to do? And she said, well, you have to talk to Marianne about it. Well, I said, well, where is she? She said, well, you're lucky because she's here this week from California, so why don't you come have lunch with us tomorrow? It was that spontaneous. This woman didn't know me from a man on the moon. So I show up for lunch, and if you know New York, one of the finest restaurants there is 21 Club, and they had a board meeting there, which they included me in. So I walk in, barely knowing, just by one meeting with the director there, and there's Marianne, and there's her board, and Naomi Wolf, and Georgette Mossbaker, and I'm like, what am I doing here? This is crazy. And so I just said, Marianne, I'd like one of these centers in Florida. Well, she said, okay. And she called me up a week later and said, how can I help you make this happen? And from there on, that was the afternoon of the evening that Wayne Dyer once again was speaking, not the same other event I was speaking of earlier. He was speaking at Unity, and I went to that and said, you won't believe this, I'm going to open up a center here in Florida. And Marianne called me, and it's all good. So before you knew it, I had a space at the Unity Church, rented a little house behind there. Within 2 weeks, we were incorporated and opened, and full-fledged operation. Wow. And so it was amazing. People were just showing up, and I've shared this before because one thing I recognized was in my guidance, it seemed like all of our needs were being met. I didn't know what the heck I was doing either. I had no experience in not-for-profit. I barely squeaked through high school. I mean, I was no brain. I didn't know what I was doing, except I was just sort of following the guidance. Well, we went ahead and we had all kinds of neat things going on, classes and seminars, but we were really originally an outreach center. And our mission statement was dedicated to the healing of our relationship with life and illness. And it was right in the middle of the AIDS crisis. And we, right there, of course, my parents in the beginning are like, oh, you're doing what? And they were so afraid that I was going to catch AIDS because I was working with these people. But, that never, again, bothered me in any way. It was just a natural flow of where I was going to go and what I was doing. Well, the outreach program at one time was tremendous. Several hundred, up to 2,000 people a week in one way, shape, or form. And we did a lot of work in the community. And we would visit nursing homes and children's HIV and AIDS facilities and have picnics for inner city kids and families. And we would take trucks full, people would donate food and clothing, and we'd take these clothes into the inner city and just open up the back of the truck and say, have at it, and these people would be so grateful to see us on Saturday mornings. It was really a wonderful experience. Well, we became known as, our little tagline was Love Heals. And we had everything made with Love Heals. We had a bus. And the bus, it was a big white bus, and it said Love Heals. The letters were big, right across it. So everybody in Palm Beach County knew the Love Heals bus. They were like, oh, you know, the Love Heals bus. And then we had a bumper sticker that said Love Heals on it, and our logo was fantastic. And people were just coming into the center. Do you have any of those bumper stickers? I want that, even if they weren't affiliated. And I really saw that the love that was created and the power that came with that was literally moving mountains and in amazing ways. People were finding peace in their despair. They were actually, even though many of them did make their transition into spirit, they really left their bodies with a great sense of peace. They weren't so scared anymore. You know, in that crisis time, so many of our clients were both predominantly either gay men with AIDS or from the Belle Glade area, which is like a third world country. Many of the Haitians there had developed AIDS as well, and HIV. So we had a lot of things that we did out in Belle Glade as well. Well, as we began to be known as the Love Heals people and people wanting our bumper sticker, I began to see that it was a bigger meaning than just the two words, because it was really happening. It was true. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about what is love and how does it heal, and how we can actually implement it into our own being and our own lives. Because I see the Namaste Center here as being a center of love and using this love to heal our own hearts and then heal each other, and also take that light into our community and beyond. But one of my favorite thoughts or concepts of A Course in Miracles, it says, first of all, there's no order of difficulty in miracles, meaning one is not harder than another. You know, we tend to gauge. We're so used to giving, as the Course says, we give everything all the meaning that it has for us. So it's like common cold, you know, a few days in bed, lots of water and orange juice, you'll be fine. Cancer, not so good there. But really, in spirit, there is no difference. There's no order of difficulty in miracles. Literally, by making that connection with spirit, we can just flush away all that doesn't resonate with that energy. That spirit of God, that love of God that comes over us just permeates all the darkness and can truly heal it. And I've seen it happen, so you can't convince me otherwise. I've seen many people have spontaneous healings just because they've literally been able to get themselves in that state of being where they are permeating and tuned in with spirit and love. And so what is... I picked up a few definitions. Well, what is love? Because we think we know what love is, and actually we don't have a clue whatsoever what love is. You know, we think of love and it's like, oh, the love of our spouse, our children, our pets, all of those things that I love my job, whatever it is. And that's wonderful, that's fine, but it's usually not love in the sense of the love of God. In other words, it's based on conditions. As long, you know, I love my job, I hate my job, you know, you've ever been there. Or, oh, you know, I love my spouse, but don't love them today, you know, they're not being a good person, and not doing what I want them to do. And so really, that's not love at all, you know. Does anyone relate to that? You know, it's, there you go, we see a hand waving. So it's true though, and you know, as long as we look for love outside of ourselves, we're never going to find it. And actually, as it's been reiterated many times for me recently, this love based on conditions, that if I continue to look, like the Course in Miracles says, ceaselessly from one thing to another to fill that void in me, it's never going to happen. And as Eckhart Tolle said, it's not going to happen because it's not going to be just right. You know, we get it, we make our little vision board and we manifest, you know, what we think we want, and then it's like, well, that's just not right. And then we start trying to fiddle with this. Well, that's not just right either. So we're just spinning our wheels, looking outside of ourselves for something that we're never going to find. And so the love that we're talking about is the love that is us, that dwells within us, that we just have to open up to and be willing to resonate with. But it's our will, our choice that makes that happen or not. So just a definition of love from the dictionary, first of all, is a profoundly tender, passionate affection for another person. Well, we know that that tender affection that we have for another can all of a sudden flip on a dime. It's all of a sudden it's not so tender once they forget to, what do they say, put the toilet seat down, empty the garbage, or whatever it is that we have those little charges about. So that profoundly tender, passionate affection turns what the Course in Miracles says from love to actually hate. And it's based on conditions. You know, do you think that God would say, I don't love her anymore because she has a dirty house, and you know, she sleeps too much, or whatever it is. It's really, we're seeking that agape love, that love of God, since we are extensions of that. We are that. We are God's. And we have that potential, yet we continue to look outside of ourselves for something that doesn't exist or isn't there. It's up to us to really make those choices. This is another definition of love, which it isn't. A feeling of warm personal attachment or deep affection, as for a parent, child, or friend. Well, you know, that deep affection, that connection that we have with others, there again, as I mentioned earlier, all of a sudden they don't fulfill our desires and needs, and just kick them out the door and move on. So I think the message thus far is recognizing that we really don't know what love really is about. Some of the other words that we identify with love are heart, passion, romantic, amour. All of these words that have been programmed into our consciousness that if we just get into our heart, or if we, and that is true, by the way, but if we just get into our heart, then all will be well. Well, we don't even really understand what that means, actually, because we think of getting into our heart means that romantic attachment, that conditions. Do you hear the word that I'm saying over and over and over again? It's conditions. And that is not love at all. It's really a time for us, I think, to step up to a more mature, godly love, to where we can love and embrace everybody. And it seems like, I don't know if it's just me, but it seems as though the more I commit to that, the more the universe sends to show me things that get my attention and make me, you know, a little bit just testing where I am, actually. I know in our neighborhood here in Flat Rock, our neighbors have been very much calling for love. You know, the Course in Miracles says we're either giving love or asking for it. And right now they're asking for love. And I think that they honestly think that Ellen and I handle snakes or something in there. We have to cease and desist our groups. This is their letter. Cease and desist your group offerings, your church at your house. Like, that's not what we're doing. Meanwhile, they advertise in the monthly programs that they send out, you know, Bible study at Betty's and, you know, poker night at Joe's or whatever, but don't go to the snake handlers up there. We got to cease and desist them. And, you know, we were talking, it's very interesting. And, you know, it's real easy. And I won't lie, I've gotten a little like, you son of a gun. But I've not been responding totally from a place of centeredness and peace, but rather just as Ellen mentioned last night, you know, what it really is, and this is so true, when we do live from our heart and come from that place, it is so threatening to some people that they can't take it. Because what do you mean you don't judge? What do you mean that you can love everybody? Oh, you say you're God? Yeah, well, you're going to hell for that one. And don't take our neighborhood with you. And so it's all of this interesting, all of these relationships that we're dealing with. So this has been a really big step up, you know, in the love bucket for me, because I've had to really look at this and say, okay, this is interesting. How can I respond in love? I don't want to, the Course in Miracles says it only takes one to heal a relationship, usually the saner of the two. So do I want to get into that insanity and, you know, like a cat and a dog fighting, or do I want to step back and come from my heart and say, what would love do here? Holy Spirit, how can I come from the highest degree of love where everybody is included, not to point fingers and make wrong? Course in Miracles also says if I defend myself, I'm attacked. So it's not about defense, because defense, attack, that perpetuates the insanity as well. But rather, as our friend Eckhart Tolle said, you know, just look at it. And just, rather than attaching thought to these emotions when I get angry, and in my mind, writing that letter, rawr, rawr, and yes, we did respond with a letter because we legally had to. But on the other hand, I don't have to carry that emotion with me. I don't have to make wrong to express where I'm coming from. And so what happens is with our emotions, that this film that we watched with Eckhart on Friday night was just so affirming for me, because our emotions, that's another thing we get caught up in. Oh, the emotion of love. Like we, you know, oh, that makes my heart flutter. Well, maybe. Or that makes me angry. But these emotions, as Eckhart talked about and other teachers say, that we're addicted to our emotions. And what happens is this emotion of like euphoria, or this emotion of fear and drudgery, they're both the same obstacle or impediment to that love. Because what happens when these things come up in our mind and then we get emotionally invested in it, what happens, we start thinking about it and obsessing and attaching, so those emotions are really taking us over, and they're like putting a veil down between us and spirit. And it really is an impediment to true love, the love of God that lives within all of us. I like what Eckhart Tolle says. He says that emotions are really what some people think they need to feel alive. You know, it's like, well, if I'm not emotionally, you know, charged up, if I'm not sliding down the zip line, or, you know, chasing drama in some way, shape, or form, then I'm not feeling alive. Yet, as he confirmed in the video, and as A Course in Miracles says, those emotions, although we may be attached to them and addicted to them, those are not anywhere a glimpse of what the love of God is all about. And what the Course in Miracles, and I'm very lightly phrasing here, but says, just imagine the greatest sense of peace and love that you've ever had, and multiply that by 1,000, and then 1,000 times again, and then maybe you'll have a glimpse of what heaven is, or what love is. Yet we continually give our attachment and all of our energy to things that aren't love at all. It's not that we have to beat ourselves up for it, feel like we've done anything wrong, but it's just a delay in our awakening. You know, we can play that game as long as we want, and the truth is, the essence of us never will change, because the spirit of love within all of us is changeless, formless, and eternal. If it's not changeless, formless, and eternal, it's not real, it's the illusion. So we have to look at what part of the illusion is still enticing me to chase it and get those emotions all revved up. Well, we had the pleasure and honor of having Dr. Nelson here a few weeks ago teaching us about the emotion code, which is trapped emotions. And those trapped emotions are things that we latch onto that bury themselves in our body or in our subconscious mind. And as long as they're trapped or hidden there, then what happens is we continue to act upon those. We're really just operating out of that iceberg underneath the tip here, and because that's really what our programs and beliefs are. So it does take a little attention and work, but I find that the easiest way to relieve ourselves is not to attach so much thought and energy into those emotions. Some therapies are based on like embracing these emotions and and staying with them for weeks or whatever. And for me, that was never a fit. Now, do I think that it serves purposes for some people? Yeah, maybe. As Eckhart says, you know, he hasn't been in their body, so he can't really judge it. And I think that's a nice way to say it. But as the interviewer said, but you're really saying that there's really, emotions are not helping us, right? And he just smiled. And so it really is up to us to be willing to let go of those things that don't serve our awakening. You know, love, what the true thing of love is, as I said, that idea of that glimpse of heaven is something that is beyond anything this world offers. So love is really beyond description. And this quote here that says, all my life my heart has yearned for a thing I cannot name. And that's really what we're seeking. It can't be named, it can't be described. The meaning of love can only be experienced. True love can only be experienced. And the closest thing I think we can experience with that is that union, connection, seeing our brother as ourself. Because our brothers and our sisters are reflecting back to us exactly what I'm making them out to be. So if I'm making them out to be a monster or I'm judging them, it's actually self-judgment. It's my own stuff that I'm projecting onto another. So it's asking us, really, from the Course in Miracles and other enlightened teachings, is asking us to take 100% responsibility for the world we see. That if these things come up, and they will, I mean, challenges happen, we don't have to let them hook us. We don't have to let them attach themselves to us and run our lives, but rather just look at it and say, that's interesting, and move on. I remember playing golf. I was always, I think one reason I was a pretty good player because my swing was really funky, according to some. And, but I was always a good little scrappy player, and I could always play pretty well. And one thing that I didn't even recognize I was doing was I was managing my emotions. So I was able to actually go to a tournament, and people would even come and say, Shar, I couldn't tell when you were walking off the 18th green if you had a great round or a horrible round because you never changed. And I really know now, looking back, that was a great gift. And I can't even say I knew where that came from, but it really was a great opportunity for me to play my best golf, because I wasn't getting so emotionally invested and like ecstatic when I did something great or beating the club when something was going wrong, but just, you know, taking that breath and just enjoying everything that was happening. When I did miss a shot or hit something really strange, I would just step back and I'd just go, that's very interesting. And, you know, without investment or emotion, I would just be able to say, how did that happen? So I was observing it, but I wasn't invested in it and throwing all that emotion into it. Well, a few things for love. One of the greatest books, I mention it often, based on A Course in Miracles, Love is Letting Go of Fear. Just the title in itself says really what love is. Because until it's not about adding on, you know, I got to go to this spiritual thing and do this and do that and heal this and heal that, but just release all of those impediments that keep us from that awareness that's already there. We think we have to continually do these things to find love or to become enlightened, yet we just have to recognize that it's already there. So there's nothing we have to do except just step back and learn to observe, not to attach thoughts to these things that happen, not to get emotionally invested. So one thing that meant so much to me, and it was a story, and I told this story at the grand opening of our center because it was so meaningful to me. And this was back in '93. And it was a story that I'd heard on Hour of Power with Robert Schuller, and it was actually Naomi Judd who had shared this story. And since I knew I was going to be working with people in hospitals and people who were ill, I was really touched by this story. And what she said was she had heard of an incident where there was a woman who was in a nursing home, and she just laid there seemingly unconscious. And, you know, the nurses would come in and out, and they would just be, you know, fluffing her up and changing her IVs or whatever they do, but just sort of going in doing the job. But there was never that connection with her. Well, all of a sudden there was a young intern who had come in, and he's looking at her, and he was obviously a thoughtful person, and he just took her hand and was stroking it and talking to her. And all of a sudden, her eyes popped open, and she looked at him and said, "I didn't think anyone cared." And just by that gesture, she was fine. She woke up and she was fine. I know that we recently, one of our friends here from the center, we were visiting her, many of us, at the nursing home here in town. And there, you walk down the hall and there's people sitting in their wheelchairs like this. And they, you know, most likely they don't have many visitors. They didn't have really much of a reason to really smile. So they just were laying there. And yet our friend, who was bombarded with visitors and good thoughts and well wishes and cards and things of that nature, she just was happy, and her healing came about so much quicker than it would have had she just been sitting there. I can't even imagine this poor woman being in her room alone and not being cared for. I really don't think she would have had the same outcome had that not occurred. So really the power of that connection, we're all yearning for that and seeking that. And although sometimes we think we're too busy to do this or that, just that little effort, that little extension of connecting and say, where could I be of service? How can I make a difference here? How can I serve? When we do that, we really have so much power and potential to change things. You know, we think we don't. Little old me, there's not much I can do to make this world a better place. But I promise you, if you just got in your car and drove to a nursing home and went in and talked to a few of these people, you could make a huge difference in their lives and the quality of their lives, because so many people are seeking that love and that connection right now. So it's not that there's nothing that we can do. There's plenty we can do. It's just a matter, are we doing it? And it's our choice. So I really want to go back to that Love Heals bus. The way that bus came in was another miracle. We had Marianne Williamson coming in to do a lecture. We had a couple thousand people in the hall. And I said, gosh, we've been doing so much outreach. We could really use a bus. If anyone has a bus out there, we could use it. And I swear, 2 days later, I'm in the office, and my assistant was like, something really cool is going to happen today. And I'm like, what? She goes, I can't tell you. And so I didn't have a clue what it was. But sure enough, this bus comes pulling in the back, and a couple of the attendees at this seminar said, you know what, we're going to buy that bus. And that was their first introduction to the center. They had never even been there. But it was just that gesture, and we were able, because of that, to really transport and offer, you know, greater services. So, you know, there are things we can do that can extend love and make that connection. It's just whether or not we're paying attention. And I think what happens, we're so wrapped up in our dramas and our little BS that we sometimes forget that there's a bigger picture out here at work. And so I think the best way we can start this and use this love to heal is to pay attention. Ask. You know, I believe, as Eckhart Tolle said, you know, what's the path to enlightenment? Well, first of all, just the mere seeking is opening that door for us to awaken. But we have to really be willing to let go, not do what we've done in the past. You know, it's the old definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting a different result. It doesn't work. So we have to be willing to change our patterns, let go of things and beliefs that don't serve us. And when we do that and completely surrender to Spirit, yesterday in our miracles class, or our ministerial class rather, one of the gals was talking about her awakening. And it was just her life. She was doing drugs and a lot of chaotic things, and her life was reflecting things that she didn't want. And so she completely surrendered to Spirit. Holy Spirit, take me over, because I can't do this anymore. And she said what washed over her was such a blessing, such a miracle that was exceeded anything she could have ever described. So it goes back to that, it's beyond description. But we have to be willing to let go of the ego's reins and let Spirit lead the show. And that means we have to be willing to let go of our ideas and our beliefs and our judgments and what we think is best. But it's that we'd rather stay with what's familiar rather than looking for something. Even though what's familiar is uncomfortable, it's sometimes not as scary as to just let go and let God, as they say. So we talked yesterday in our class as well, and this will be just what I close with, is the highest degree of love. And our ministry is based, Alliance of Divine Love is based on the premise that the decisions we make, the mantra we live by is, what would love do here? What's the highest degree of love in this situation? Well, you know how you hear the same thing over and over and over again, and you get deeper meaning when you hear it? And that's, that yesterday, what came up for me was the person I was leaving out of the equation, and I bet you some of you all can relate, as myself. Instead of like, well, what's the highest degree of love for you, and you, I was like, well, what's the highest degree of love for Charlotte? And I think maybe some of you all could relate to that. Because if we can't do that for ourselves, we really can't offer that to another. If we can only give away what we have in ourselves. So that highest degree of love starts with self-love. And sometimes that highest degree of love is not always just smiling and just, oh, you're so beautiful and wonderful. Sometimes it takes a good smack in the face, doesn't it? And we heard a story from someone yesterday, said someone literally had to sock her to say, what, crazy? And I was like, oh yeah, I was. And, as a matter of fact. And, but that was, you know, it didn't look like what we think love is, but that sometimes is the case. One of my very good friends her son's very involved in drugs right now, and they've had to let him live outside of the house. That's a tough, tough thing. But you know, they finally got to the point, as they say, sick and tired of being sick and tired. They haven't, their way hasn't worked. But the tough love is sometimes the highest degree of love. So we have to really